Welcome to Cove Audiobooks, the Doctrine Series. You're listening to LWD1, The Fundamentals of Land Power, 2017 edition. This is Chapter 4, Generating Land Power. Generating Land Power. As the foundation of Australia's land power, the Army must be able to generate credible and sustainable land effects. Only through persistence is it possible to control the influence of the land domain and its population in the future operating environment. However, Australia's limited size will always mean its army is a small force, capable of a brigade and lower manoeuvre and predominantly a meaningful contributor to coalitions. It is through quality and technology that the army achieves its weight and thereby provides relevant options to the government. The army is a medium weight force, a credible tactical force that projects across strategic distances to achieve national objectives. To generate this force, its structural flexibility not only includes organisational changes and structures, but also the fighting power of army, or army's capacity to fight and win. The process of generating and sustaining these forces is capability management and requires the balancing of current force requirements, or preparedness, with future force development, or modernisation, to produce strategically relevant and combat-ready forces. The core role of Army remains the ability to engage in combat as part of a joint force against other armed forces. However, there is a dichotomy in this development of capability, particularly with force structure. The Army must be able to generate capabilities for the most likely but less dangerous, as well as the most dangerous and less likely forms of war and conflict. While the Army is highly likely to be called upon to undertake stability operations, it would be premature to suggest that war among states, including the major powers, has been eliminated as a feature of the international system. Fighting power. As a concept, fighting power is a way in which Army generates its capacity through the integration of the physical, moral, and intellectual components at both the individual and organisational level. The intellectual components comprise the knowledge of war, warfare, and cognitive capability. The what to think. The moral component reinforces culture, values, and legitimacy, the will to fight. The physical components provide army capabilities and functional effects, the means to fight. When all three components interact, Army's capacity to operate in the future environment will be strengthened. The intellectual component. The intellectual component is the way in which creativity and analytical ability are applied to meet military challenges. Past success in battle is no guarantee of future victory. An army's way of fighting must be subject to constant scrutiny and examination. The intellectual component of fighting power provides the level of understanding necessary for success in the complex battle space and is supported by an organisational climate that enables creativity and innovation, analytical excellence, and continuous learning. Army's organisational climate is predicated on its versatility, agility, and adaptability to enable the innovation essential to success. Versatility. Versatility is the ability to perform a wide array of tasks and activities. This begins with the individual who must possess many skills at high readiness levels and to mission proficiency. The skills of the individual are further amplified by complementary and supporting group skills. This enables generation of a wide range of high-quality operational options. Agility. Agility is the ability to shift between tasks rapidly. This requires both physical and mental dexterity and begins with the individual soldier. Personnel must be sufficiently physically and mentally tough to analyse problems rapidly, often under great stress, to produce solutions that are realistic and achievable, as well as unexpected and unpredictable. These attributes must also be institutionalised within a command structure. Adaptability. Adaptability is the ability to respond to new needs or changes in context without a loss of functionality. This is essential given the inability to predict and anticipate the full range and nature of operational threats. Adaptability is a product of the human component of an organisation, the capacity and willingness to innovate and change to solve a new problem or execute an unexpected mission. A key element in developing the intellectual component of fighting power is a robust approach to professional military education. This is designed to develop creative, thinking leaders. The The responsibility for implementing professional military education in the Army is three-tiered. It resides with the education establishment, the Army and joint schools, as well as with commanders and individuals. All professional schools should focus on developing the talent for military judgment through education. All leaders and commanders have a responsibility to undertake continuing professional education programs for their subordinates, which include developing military judgment and decision-making. Every soldier has an individual responsibility to study the profession of arms. A soldier without either interest in or knowledge of the history and theory of warfare, the intellectual content of the military profession, is a soldier in appearance only. Self-directed study in the art and science of war, appropriate to one's rank and trade, is at least equal in importance to maintaining physical condition and should receive at least equal time. As Army learns, its doctrine must constantly evolve as it is the repository of Army's institutional knowledge. Success in the competitive learning environment of conflict requires rapid consolidation of new knowledge and experience into doctrine, training and education, and institutional governance as appropriate. This requires all soldiers to contribute to and interact with Army's knowledge base. The physical component. The physical component of fighting power provides the means to fight. Army describes its physical warfighting capabilities by function, represented by 4 land force elements. These are combat. Combat elements are those land force elements designed to engage the enemy with direct fire weapons. Combat elements include armour, infantry, special forces and aviation. Secondly, combat support. Combat support elements provide offensive support and operational assistance to combat elements. Combat support elements include offensive support, ground-based air defence, intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance capabilities, electronic warfare elements, combat engineers, and battlefield support aviation. Thirdly, combat service support. Combat service support elements support the land force through the provision of sustainment, movement, distribution, health services, personnel services, and the equipment maintenance activities. Finally, command support. Command support elements enable commanders to execute their command responsibilities, exercise control, and provide specialist advice. They include headquarters staff, communication and information systems capabilities, public affairs, and civil military cooperation and military policing. While all land force elements share similar roles, they may deliver the required effects differently. For example, aviation, armour and infantry land force elements specialise in aerial, mounted and dismounted combat respectively, but collectively share the primary role of combat. Likewise, transport, ordnance, maintenance and health share a common combat support role, but perform different aspects of this role. Therefore, while each of the land force elements fulfills separate roles and has different responsibilities, each has varying strengths and weaknesses. Consequently, the land force elements are interdependent and a combination of arms and enabling elements will be present to a greater or lesser extent in any land force contribution. This combined arms approach is fundamental to generating warfighting capability. The moral component. Army's will to fight is provided primarily by the moral component of fighting power and supplies and sustains the will to fight. The moral component embodies those individual and organisational characteristics that are fundamental to success: morale, integrity, values, and legitimacy. Conflict requires soldiers to act in the face of mortal peril, which demands mental toughness and determination measured by physical and moral courage. Morale is the collective and individual confidence in an organisation that encourages individuals to subordinate their own welfare to collective goals. It is closely related to their shared sense of purpose and values, or esprit de corps, which is supported by spiritual, rational, and material foundations. Morale requires trust between the individual and the organisation and between the individuals in the organisation. High morale sustains individual and collective will in the face of adversity and is thus fundamental to the generation of fighting power. Morale is significantly enhanced by success. The rational foundations of morale reflect the importance of reason. Soldiers should be confident that they have been well prepared for operations. They must be given tasks that are meaningful and provide scope for professional development. Commanders and their staff must acknowledge that their effectiveness is ultimately based on their confidence and respect of their soldiers. Morale is nourished by sound leadership, effective communication, and by meeting the emotional and material needs of the individual soldiers and their families to the maximum extent practicable. Integrity. Integrity is essential to soldiering and sustaining the will to fight, but assumes moral courage. Together with mental toughness, which enables soldiers to overcome physical fatigue, danger, and peer and other pressures, integrity supports the soldiers in making morally right decisions. Successful military operations demand integrity and moral courage at all levels. The importance of a soldier's moral character cannot be overstated in terms of developing and sustaining fighter power. The moral character is sustained through the individual system of beliefs and values. A shared sense of purpose provides the framework for the application of the Army's values of courage, initiative, respect, and teamwork. Firstly, courage. Every Australian soldier is expected to demonstrate physical and moral courage. To be courageous in the Army is to believe in the mission, Army's goals, and one's mates, and involves doing what is right and fair in all circumstances and under the most demanding conditions. Secondly, initiative. Every Australian soldier is expected to show initiative whenever required and to be committed to continuous learning and self-development. Initiative is fundamental to professional mastery and essential to the effective practice of mission command. Thirdly, respect. Respect is the glue that binds the other three values together. It is the quality which will both temper and sharpen the hard edge that must be a part of military service in order to survive and prevail in war. Furthermore, the Australian nation must trust the standing army to respect the law of the land and be capable of restraint and prudence in the use of appropriate and sanctioned violence. Respect also extends to those whom the army is entrusted to protect and support when deployed overseas. Finally, teamwork. The Australian Army is a team of teams in which all soldiers are expected to be able to rely on their mates. Without a team, a soldier is just another person. Robust, cohesive teams are the personnel building blocks of Army's capability. Legitimacy. Legitimacy refers to the perceptions of justice, legality, and morality as they apply to military operations and related actions. At the highest level, legitimacy finds expression in Australia using force only under defined circumstances and in a strictly controlled manner which reflects Australia's approach to war. More broadly, such legitimacy is expressed in terms of international conventions covering the resort to and use of military force, including a substantial body of law embodying the just war doctrine. Legitimacy also flows directly through to the lowest levels when expressed in rules of engagement and orders for opening fire. Professional mastery. The profession of arms is unique because of the importance of its task, the moral and ethical dedication required to achieve it, and the lethal nature of its capabilities. Soldiers have many tasks outside combat operations, but ultimately, the core purpose and reason the Army exists is to protect the nation through the application of lethal force. If required, soldiers kill and may die to achieve the mission. The moral implications could not be greater, and thus they must be compelled to dedicate themselves to a constant re-examination of what it means to be a professional soldier. Professional mastery binds the intellectual and moral components of fighting power and is critical to generating firepower and thus warfighting capability. The focus of professional mastery is on people. Every soldier must adapt given the changing character of war. Professional mastery is the mechanism by which Army can produce soldiers and teams that respond positively to change, especially when confronted with problems, challenges, and ambiguous contexts. Professional mastery assists soldiers to exert themselves physically, morally, and intellectually to overcome fear, confusion, fatigue, and uncertainty. It also guides behaviour through an understanding of the consequences of actions or inactions and is the foundation of military discipline. The Australian Army is committed to the profession of arms. Its members are experts trained in the ethical application of land combat power. A professional soldier is an expert in the profession of arms. These men and women adhere to the highest ethical standards and are dedicated to service of the nation. Army Capability Management. Capability management represents a balance between devoting resources to preparing the current force and the development of the future Army. Army's capability is developed to provide the government with a range of options to support the national interest. These options are based on strategic guidance, which is reviewed by the government and defence on a regular basis. Army must be relevant, credible, and cost-effective. To achieve this, it employs a capability management framework that is based on the Army Capability Sub-Outputs model and the key functions of capability. The outputs of the Army are the deployed force, the force reserve, the enabling component, and the support base. The deployed force contains the Army elements that are deployed. Strategic guidance determines the size and composition of the deployed force. The force reserve provides an expansion and sustainability base for deployed forces through individual reinforcement, individual replacement, force element rotation, and equipment cross-levelling. The enabling component includes individual training and base logistics support elements from Army and the wider Defence Organisation. It provides the support required to expand and sustain the deployed force and the combat force reserve, as well as the means to generate new capabilities. The Army is heavily dependent on support received from its national and international support bases. The national support base includes all government departments, agencies, and industry that provide support to the Army, such as infrastructure, materiel, and logistics. Preparedness. The Army is required to maintain a level of preparedness in accordance with the Joint Operations Command operational preparedness requirements. Army translates this requirement into the annual Chief of Army Preparedness Directive. Selected land force capabilities are held at varying levels of preparedness, described by the terms operational level of capability and minimum level of capability. A directed level of capability captures the levels of capability required to meet preparedness, ongoing operations, and the known national task requirements. The levels of operational capability are determined by a combination of the requirements for short and longer notice operations and the need for critical, individual, and collective skills. Modernisation. An army that resists change and does not follow the path of continuous modernisation will fail in its mission. The Australian Army thus prepares to meet future operational needs balanced against the requirement of current operational commitments. The anticipation of future needs must be cognizant of the time required to introduce capabilities and the length of time for which they are expected to be in service. This requires a continuous modernisation process which provides the intellectual investment by Army and its future effectiveness. To meet this challenge, Army has embraced strategy-driven, concept-led, capability-based modernisation. This approach utilises warfighting concepts to investigate and describe future operating environments and to guide the development of military capabilities within the context of endorsed strategic guidance. This optimises Army's capability by planning for future and also responding rapidly to operational requirements as soon as they are identified. By anticipating Army's needs as far into the future as possible and seeking to meet those needs as soon as practicable, the process of modernisation can be incremental and continuous. A strategic approach to modernisation enables Army to meet the challenge of developing optimal capabilities and effectively introducing them into service in a constantly changing environment by setting objectives and ensuring alignment within Army, between Army and the other services, defence groups, agencies, external organisations, allies and partners that are the key stakeholders in Army's modernisation efforts. Conclusion. While political and technological developments change the character of land warfare, its nature as a violent clash of wills remains unchanged. In the land environment, Army is the primary source of Australian land power. Historically, conflict has primarily been decided on land, and neither air nor naval power alone can achieve victory on land. Consequently, land forces and their capacity to influence people will continue to play a central role in Australian statecraft and its employment of military power. Although times and technologies have changed, the fundamental mission of the Australian Army endures. It is to prepare land forces for war in order to defend Australia and its national interests. To be successful in this mission, the Army must continue to achieve military relevance in an increasingly complex and lethal global environment. Warfighting is employed in conjunction with other instruments of national power to protect Australia's sovereignty and national interests. The effective employment of these instruments is dependent on a whole-of-government approach. Army's role in warfare is to generate land force elements which fight as combined arms teams within a joint force to generate land power. Army contributes these forces to shape Australia's strategic environment, defeat threat forces, and to protect or support civil populations. Army's contribution is unique and central to Australia's warfighting ability. Army's warfighting philosophy underpins the Australian approach to the use of land power. Evolved in part from historical principles of war, the philosophy recognises the innately human nature of war and embraces the essential function of mission command and close combat in the application of manoeuvre by combined arms teams. Army's doctrine must remain a firm foundation upon which Army can educate and train its officers and soldiers, particularly in peacetime. As such, this capstone doctrine, Land Warfare Doctrine 1, The Fundamentals of Land Power, serves the Australian Army as a statement of its approach to land warfare. It has described our fundamental philosophy for the employment of land power based on broad lessons of history and human experience. It is an enduring and universal document, independent of any specific organisation or structure, any type of technology, or any particular type of intensity of warfare. It has codified what the Australian Army regards as its philosophical foundation and provides the intellectual foundation for the generation of land power. Thank you for listening to Chapter 4 of 4 in our Land Warfare Doctrine 1 audiobook series. Head to www.cove.org.au to listen to other podcasts in the collection.